Ladies and gents, it's Monday, and it is, of course, time for an alternative paper review. First up to the Daily Mail this morning. Woke RAF is running out of Top Gun pilots. Oh my God. That's right, people. Unlawful diversity drive jeopardizes the Prime Minister's pledge to put jets in the sky over Ukraine. So first, let's talk about what this story actually is, and then let's talk about the Daily Mail's representation or misrepresentation thereof. So I guess the first thing is to broach the subject of diversity and inclusion drives. Now, it's no coincidence that they're talking about this sort of stuff directly off the back of Elon Musk and Donald Trump's Doge programs over in the US. We've spoken about this a lot over the last couple of weeks, like the so-called shit British version of things. It's where something is rolled out, reasonably successfully over in the United States, and then somebody, whether it's a TV producer or a politician or somebody over here, is like, oh, we should do that like America. Now, the most recent examples of this have been people like Richard Tice, the Institute of Economic Affairs here. Do we need a British Doge? Yeah, we already had one, lads. Yeah, it was called austerity. Yeah, you and the rest of the papers wanked yourself limp over it. So they want a UK Doge for cost-cutting reasons. They want to use things like diversity and inclusion programs, initiatives, as a pretext for, for getting rid of all of this government waste. And so now what the Mail are riding in on, campaigning-wise, is to say that at this time of great geopolitical tumult, we should be more worried about putting pilots in cockpits and having them up in the skies to defend freedom and democracy than whether they are a straight white male or whatnot. But the thing is with this is the RAF are no different to any other big employer, any other big institution, company, corporation or whatever. But the reason that they have these diversity programs, the reason that they say we need to hire people in from different ethnic backgrounds is because the more diverse an institution is, the more successful it becomes. Like, all of these studies back this up. Don't ask me why. I don't know. I'm not a statistician. I'm not an employment law expert. I mean, if you forced me, like, gun to head, if you said, explain it, Aid, I would probably dance around the theory that if you're a commercial entity, like a retail outlet or a radio station or a chocolate manufacturer, like something like that, if you have people from different races, colours, creeds, genders, ages, representing your product or service en masse to what is actually an increasingly cosmopolitan, multicultural society, then it makes sense that people from those different races, colours, creeds, genders and ages might then look at your product or service and then go, oh, okay, yeah, I see that person on the advert, so I can relate to them. Or I know that they're not racist or whatever. So you might find yourself more likely to spend your money in a company, in a car showroom, on a chocolate bar that is more welcoming to you and your family, or somebody that you can more relate to. Does that make sense? So there's probably a commercial uplift. There's probably an uplift in terms of not money that you would have to then allocate to things like employment tribunals. Like, if you are the NHS, right, or a police service or the RAF, right? Whatever the company or organization, at some point, you are going to get in a situation where you try to dismiss somebody. You try to put them through HR procedures, like to offboard them. You put them on a performance improvement plan. You give them key points that they need to improve on, and then that doesn't work out. You give them a verbal written warning, a final written. Eventually, you offboard them, you exit them from the company, and rightly or wrongly, they are going to feel disgruntled. They're going to be they're going to be out for your blood after that. They're going to be like, they wronged me, they got rid of me, and I was actually amazing at my job. And then, rightly or wrongly, they're going to clutch at any straw they can to blame you. And if you don't have diversity and inclusivity workshops, targets, programs, you're going to find eventually, like, somebody is going to say, well, yeah, of course they got rid of me. Look, it's a majority white board. I was the only person of colour in the department, and surprise, surprise, I'm the one they sacked. Like, that doesn't mean there aren't, like, racist eventualities going on out there. It doesn't mean that people aren't sacked on the basis of their colour or creed or cultural background. Obviously, that does happen, and it is disgusting. But I'm just saying, like, as a commercial entity, if you wanted to protect yourself against those hefty payouts that could go into the tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds in compensation, like, you don't even need to be a woke organisation. You don't need to be left-leaning or cuddly or lefty or liberal to run these workshops and have these targets. Even the Daily Mail themselves will run diversity and inclusion workshops. You just have to be somebody at board level in the RAF, the head of the people function, or a lawyer, or even the CFO. You just have to be somebody at board level who goes, yeah, how do we mitigate the risk of us having to pay out a settlement like this again? Because this is coming directly out of P&L. This is affecting the projects and programs that we have to allocate money to next financial year. So how do we mitigate this? And then somebody, with less honest intentions might put up their hand and go, yeah, honestly, I don't really give a fuck about equality. Don't care whatsoever. All I care about is reducing your payouts. And one way you can do that is by saying, of course we care about equality. Of course we're not institutionally racist. How could we be institutionally racist? Look, we ran 10 separate diversity workshops last year. So yes, what am I saying here? I'm saying that the Daily Mail are calling the RAF woke because the RAF have run diversity initiatives and diversity hiring programs. I'm saying they're not even particularly woke, the armed forces. They are just another big institution who seek to guard themselves against very expensive employment tribunals by either honestly or superficially running these sorts of hiring programs for the reason or sole reason, depending on how honest or dishonest they are, of avoiding costly settlements in the future. Let's move on. Over to the I now. Ministers want to freeze out NIMBY groups to end nonsense planning delays. Yeah, it's a subject close to my heart, this one. What is a NIMBY? A NIMBY is a not in my backyard activist who doesn't want or would rather not see a new build development go up near them when actually, frankly, they would rather step out their back door and look out over lovely scenic fields. Not in my backyard. I accept there's a housing crisis. I'm really sorry for Gen Z and Gen A that they can't afford to get on the ladder. But also, I don't want your new builds anywhere near me, thanks. And of course, this is a story. It says there's a little sort of subheading here. Ministers aim to tackle NIMBYs and strip out nonsensical delays to building caused by wrangling over obscure matters, such as the speed of cricket balls. That sounds made up. I don't think the speed of cricket balls are legitimately slowing down the building process really anywhere. I mean, maybe they are. I don't know. Doesn't it sound? It sounds like one of these stories that newspapers wheel out, where they're like, "Can you believe that this refugee wasn't sent home because he likes chicken nuggets?" It's like that sort of stuff, isn't it? It's like, no, I do. I do not believe that. Do you? Absolutely, 100%. Now, I don't want to spend too much on the housing crisis because I have talked about it quite a lot in the past, but the simple matter of fact with this stuff is there are not enough houses, and so this supply and demand equation flares up, where the houses that there are then inflated in value. And so the obvious solution to that is to build more houses, and also to build more social housing, because when there's not enough houses to buy, right, and they're way out of price reach for you, you're stuck renting. And then the supply and demand spills over into the rental sector. And so now, obviously, private rentals are astronomical. A lot of people say, well, how would you solve the shortage of housing aid when people like NIMBYs get involved? They frustrate house building. The housing developers jack up the price. In my hometown, in Maidenhead, my mum was telling me about a housing development that's on or near to an old golf course there. Not too far from a motorway, so not even like particularly lovely. But I'm sure they'll be lovely. I'm sure they will be lovely once they're finished. But yeah, she was telling me that a 3-bed house in this new development in my hometown is going to be £750,000, 750 grand. for just a family home, a 3-bed house there. So yeah, I don't know, like to my mind, the solution is to drastically ramp up house building. I don't care where you bring the builders in from, if it affects net migration figures, because the housing crisis is something that literally touches everybody in this country. You want a wartime building effort to satisfy the supply and demand issue. You want an industrial return of social housing to temper the private rental market. You want a return of 100% mortgages so that people who aren't or haven't been in a position to save up for a deposit, they can still buy a house. And effectively, it's just owned by the bank, right? But then you benefit from the growth in the capital value of that property. And then finally, I think you want to, round up the NIMBYs and have them jailed as a threat to national security. Let's move on. Finally, to The Sun this morning. BBC bosses potty plan, it says. Oh, it wouldn't be an edition of The Sun without some sort of weird, contorted, likely misrepresented kind of narrative against the BBC. Let's take a look, shall we? What is it? Chats of the day, it says. Match of the day has too much footy, is the quote. Cut action for punditry, it says. And just quickly, because we are running out of time here, this is basically what this is the BBC are seeking to respond to the current media climate, right? Fewer people are watching terrestrial TV. More and more people are watching just clips of things on Instagram and TikTok. The BBC have to move with the times because Murdochian hate rags like The Sun endlessly bash them or criticise them for being out-of-touch dinosaurs. And so part of that adaptation and evolution is to trim down salaries. So they've off-boarded Gary Lineker. Maybe you could take them to a tribunal. Part of it will be aggressively moving into the online space and making sure that they're uploading clips so they can compete with some of their other sports content providers. And part of it will be responding to the change in the media ecosystem, which is, along the lines of podcasting, right? It's like the BBC chairman or the producers have looked at the media landscape and they've gone like, do you know what's really popular at the moment? Do you know what people can't get enough of? Is 4 straight men, maybe 1 woman, right? In a circle or a semicircle, all with microphones, all sharing their thoughts and opinions. People love that. They can't get enough of it. And so, maybe they've looked at Match of the Day and they're like, yes, obviously we're going to show football. Clearly we're going to show football. We are, at our foundations, we are a footballing show. But we can't ignore the fact that people are watching clips elsewhere. They do get content instantly on X, on TikTok, on Instagram. But much like the newspapers who now seek to criticise the BBC, maybe what we do is instead of going for the instant news, instead of going for the instant content, the breaking headlines, right? People could get that on the internet. What we will provide is analysis and opinion. Like all the BBC are doing here is doing exactly what newspapers did about 10 years ago. They concluded that they couldn't compete with the online instant news space. 24-hour news online. And they said, do you know what we could do, though? What we could bring to the table, what people will definitely flock to us for is deeply rooted, vociferous opinions and analysis and comments. That's what we'll bring to the table. People will fucking love it. I mean, you have to take this sort of front page with a pinch of salt. Whenever you see something like this from a Murdochian newspaper, don't take it too seriously, because Murdoch hates the BBC. He absolutely detests it. Why does he hate it, Aid? Well, because he's forced to compete with a publicly funded broadcaster / media conglomerate, but they aren't forced to shoulder the same commercial pressures as he and his institutions are. But the BBC makes the same amount of money every month and every quarter, regardless of how unpopular, disparaged and deeply problematic papers like The Sun suggest the BBC Saturday night schedules have become. But yeah, I mean, look, in the interest of balance, in the interest of being fair, I suppose if I really consider it, it isn't fair, is it? The BBC do have an advantage over Murdoch. They do get their money regardless of how good or bad their programming is. They do benefit from some inarguable level of privilege there, don't they? It does seem a little bit unfair on old Roops. Which leads us to the obvious question to round off with, which is how long until right-wing rags like The Sun begin their campaign for some sort of inclusivity and equality legislation to level that field. See you all tomorrow.
Just